Battlefield is a franchise that needs no introduction. Having established itself as a pillar of large-scale, squad-based warfare since the groundbreaking release of Battlefield 1942 in the beginning half of the 2000s. From the urban chaos of Battlefield 3 to the charming, character-driven escapades of Battlefield Bad Company, the series has consistently delivered expansive multiplayer experiences. I've always loved Battlefield and have played almost every entry in the series, but here's the thing, I don't think I've ever actually finished a Battlefield campaign. For me, the franchise thrives in its multiplayer chaos. As far as campaigns go though, I've really only heard good things about Bad Company. And while I plan to get to those games eventually, I wanted to dive into something different first. Staying true to my niche of covering these 7 out of 10 shooters that have been collecting dust in my Steam library, I wanted to take a closer look at Battlefield Hardline. A game that takes a bold departure from the traditional formula, trading war zones and military hardware for a gritty cops and robbers narrative, that blends tactical stealth gameplay with elements reminiscent of open-world action titles. This pivot sparked intrigue and controversy, as Hardline sought to redefine what Battlefield could be.
Slow down.
Okay.
Is there a problem, ma'am?
Lid doesn't fucking fit.
Well, good luck, ma'am.
Fuck you!
Battlefield Hardline was developed by Visceral Games, a studio best known for the third-person survival horror masterpiece Dead Space. After a conversation between Visceral's Steve Paputzis and DICE's Carl Magnus Trodson at an EA Studio Summit, the idea of a cops versus criminals Battlefield game was born. DICE provided support, but Visceral took the lead, marking the first time a Battlefield game was spearheaded by a studio outside of DICE. It was an ambitious step into unfamiliar territory, being Visceral's first-person shooter project, but they were excited nevertheless. Visceral wanted to take Battlefield in a new direction by crafting a campaign that slowed down the pace, focusing more on storytelling and tactical gameplay, which stood in sharp contrast to the franchise's typical destruction-filled military romps. The team drew inspiration from the works of legendary author Elmore Leonard, whose gritty crime dramas form the foundation for films like Get Shorty and Jackie Brown, and TV shows such as Justified. Leonard's influence is evident in the game's tone, narrative structure, and its morally complex characters. In line with this narrative shift, Visceral emphasized player agency and how objectives could be tackled. Players were given the freedom to storm into scenarios with guns blazing, or take a more thoughtful, stealthy approach, using non-lethal methods like arrests to take enemies out of the action. This design philosophy reinforced the game's thematic departure from a traditional Battlefield title, encouraging players to think and act more like a detective than a soldier. Visceral fully embraced the TV show concept by casting a blend of actors from both television and video games to bring the story to life. The campaign is structured like a season of a cop drama, with each chapter framed as an episode. If you quit the game, you'll even get a "Next Time on Hardline" teaser showcasing the upcoming events. Relaunching the game and starting a new episode treats you to a "Previously on Hardline" recap, highlighting key moments from prior chapters. They even hired Bill Johnson, a director known for his work on Justified and The Americans, to oversee the actors' performances. Game director Ian Millam noted Johnson's impact, stating, "He helped us get our scenes and the story right, and we evolved his style to be right for games." The game opens with Mick Mendoza on a prison transport bus, before flashing back 3 years to a tense drug bust. As the newest member of Miami's Vice Squad, Mendoza teams up with Detective Stoddard to raid a hotel apartment. I immediately didn't like this guy. His character was written extremely well if their goal was to make somebody very easily hateable. They breach the door and find 4 armed men who initially surrender, but chaos erupts when a woman bursts from the kitchen, shotgun blazing. A firefight ensues, ending with the 3 armed suspects dead, and I'm pretty sure the guys in handcuffs caught a few strays as well because they're not moving. As Mendoza collects evidence, another suspect, Shay Dorset, arrives and flees once he sees the detectives. They pursue him through Miami streets in a high-speed chase. With backup cornering Dorset, Stoddard shoots out his tire, causing the car to crash. Mendoza arrests the suspect with a brutal slam against the car roof as the game's opening credits roll. It's pretty clear from this opening that we're not going to be getting a traditional Battlefield experience. In fact, at multiple points through this playthrough, I found myself wondering why this game even had the name Battlefield attached to it. It uses the Frostbite engine, and there are guns. Those are the only 2 things this single-player campaign have in common with any other Battlefield game, and I'm not sure I hate that. Episode 1, titled Back to School, is the introduction to a majority of the game mechanics. After the prologue, Mendoza is partnered with seasoned detective Kai Mendao. Captain Dawes assigns them to track down Tyson Latchford, whose stamp was found on seized, hot-shot drugs. Driving through a rundown Miami neighborhood, Kai and Nick discuss the city's escalating drug war. We learn a lot about Nick and his upbringing, having grown up in a shady neighborhood in Miami. When asked how he avoided all the crime and getting caught up with drugs, he replied that his mom worked hard and she loved him. He also acknowledges that that's kind of cliche. Exiting their vehicle to avoid alerting locals, they find Bricks, one of Latchford's associates. After a tense exchange, Nick handcuffs Bricks, who reveals that Tap is nearby. Despite Nick's hesitation, Kai leaves Bricks restrained, justifying her actions by referencing his past attempt to kill an undercover officer. The game takes the next few sections to teach the player about the stealth system in Hardline. The enemies have 3 alert states, similar to games like Manhunt. They are either unaware of your presence, suspicious, or alert. Unlike most stealth games though, it doesn't seem like you can get out of the alert state once it's been triggered. In my case, I usually just restarted from a checkpoint if that happens. You have shell casings that you could throw to create a distraction, and if you could predict enemy routes, you can take out enemies to lure others into investigating the bodies. It's risky because if they get too close to the body, the entire level will become suspicious and start searching for you, but if executed properly, it can be a great tool to split up groups. There are 3 ways to take out enemies. You can shoot them, knock them out, or arrest them.
Stop. Hands up. Wait.
Hardline has a progression system called Expert Level. It rewards you for acting like a detective and taking criminals out properly, typically by giving you access to new weapons and attachments for every level you go up. To arrest someone, you will need to first sneak up to them. When you see the shield icon appear over their head, you can press the arrest button to make your presence known, and you show your police badge. This will cause up to 3 criminals that had the badge icon over their head to surrender and put their hands up. When approaching them, you will need to switch between the target, as looking away from one for too long will result in them trying to grab their gun. You could then take them down and handcuff them, taking them out of the fight permanently.
I got the other one.
The detectives coerce Tap into wearing a wire and leading them to Tyson's hideout at an abandoned elementary school. This is where you gain access to the scanner, allowing you to tag targets. You'll be alerted when tagging a target if they have an active warrant. You could arrest them for additional points. Each level has a set number of NPCs with warrants, and it's a secondary objective to arrest them all. The scanner can also be used to photograph evidence and build cases against criminals in the game. Your scanner will vibrate when a piece of evidence is near, or if you enter the scanner, it will show you where the closest piece of evidence is, with an arrow in distance. Completing cases also unlocks additional weapons and attachments. Tap lures Tyson, but before they can secure him, a gang of gunmen storm the building, killing Tyson's associates. Kai and Nick fend off the attackers, but discover Tyson was never physically present. Tracing his location through an IP address, they confront Tyson at his hideout, only for more criminals to ambush them. Kai is wounded in the firefight, and Nick covers her while fighting off waves of attackers until SWAT arrives. When asked if he knows Tyson, Nick dryly responds,
He does spreadsheets.
Still recovering from their last assignment, Captain Dawes sends Kai and Nick to bring in drug wholesaler Leo Ray, who claims to have information about the escalating drug war. When they confront Leo, he refuses to cooperate, demanding to speak only with Dawes, and insulting Kai by referencing Tyson Latchford. Tensions boil over when Kai tries to take Leo's bag, sparking a gunfight between factions. Amid the chaos, unidentified henchmen attack, killing Leo's associates, prompting him to flee. This is one of the few times in the campaign where a gunfight is inevitable. I guess it was probably a design choice to change the pace a little, but I would have still preferred to play non-lethally. The levels in Hardline are described as sandboxes, giving the player freedom to complete tasks how they'd like. Bigger levels are broken up into sections, so while the game is not really open world, it's about as close as we can get while still being a linear experience. You'll notice on your minimap that sections will be highlighted blue, and once you complete it, you'll move on to another blue section. The hotel level is our first real taste of a gameplay loop that I can only describe as a blend between Hotline Miami and Dishonored. You get a checkpoint and are given a room full of enemies to eliminate. You could easily pull out a rifle and go to town, but that's not what a real detective would do. The majority of my 20 hours in this game were spent figuring out enemy pathing and the best order to take everyone down. My main goal was to arrest as many suspects as I could, preferably all of them, which, I'll proudly boast, I was mostly successful. I gave up a few times after repeated tries on segments that felt like they were forcing a shootout, but for the most part, I arrested damn near every enemy in this game. So after spending an hour arresting everyone in the hotel, Nick catches up to Leo, only to witness Kai savagely beating him, including smashing a trash can into his face. Shocked, Nick intervenes, reminding her that they are surrounded by criminals. Kai reluctantly helps Leo walk while Nick secures the bag. After fighting their way through even more enemies, they escape in a monster truck, smashing through barricades along the way. At the rendezvous point, Dawes is furious at Leo's beaten state and questions what happened. Nick lies, claiming Leo didn't buckle in during the drive. Dawes pointedly asks Nick if he'll stick to that story, and Nick agrees, realizing he's just covered for Kai. When he questions what just happened, Kai tells him that he's now on the same page as her, suggesting Dawes wanted this outcome all along. Captain Dawes informs Nick and Kai that Leo has revealed his boss, Remy Neltz, is behind the drug smuggling operation. Neltz's crew collects drug bales dropped from planes in the Everglades. Despite cooperating, Leo is left protective custody, distrusting the police after Kai's brutal treatment. The detectives are ordered to locate and tag drug bales while investigating Neltz, with instructions to arrest him if encountered. In the Everglades, Nick and Kai discuss the escalating drug war and Kai's history with Tyson Latchford. After tagging 2 bales, Nick is attacked by a gator, but is saved by Kai. A fucking gator. Armed with a grappling hook and zip line, they explore a boathouse, sawmill, and gator farm, gathering evidence that leads them to Neltz's hideout at an abandoned aquatic stadium. Cornering Neltz, the detectives are shocked when he reveals a deal with Stoddard before escaping by speedboat. This level probably took me the longest, mainly because there are 4 enemies in this little area and I had to figure out how to get one of them away and detain them and then detain the other 3. It was a fucking nightmare. Tracking Neltz to a warehouse, Nick and Kai move in before Stoddard's SWAT team can take credit. They fight off Neltz's allies and force him to surrender. Neltz again claims protection under a deal with Stoddard, who suddenly appears and kills him, pretending it was self-defense. Just shoots the guy right in the head. Stoddard offers them a share of Neltz's dirty money. Disgusted, Nick rejects the bribe and walks away, now deeply suspicious of Stoddard's corruption.
Now I see why.
Captain Dawes informs Nick that Kai playing along with Stoddard's dirty money offer was a test to gauge his loyalty. He assigns Nick and Kai to return to Neltz's warehouse to find evidence linking Stoddard to Neltz's operation. There, Nick uncovers a hidden voice recorder capturing a deal between Stoddard and Neltz. Kai discovers a shipping container filled with Tamu Tamu toys, traced to a single shop in Miami's Palm Court Mall. Suspecting the real stash is in a warehouse supplying the store, they head there. While investigating the warehouse, Nick witnesses Stoddard asserting control over Neltz's operation and shooting a henchman. Kai spots a suspicious van and follows it. Nick confronts Stoddard but is forced to work with him when a rival gang attacks the warehouse. Outside, Nick attempts to arrest Stoddard but is interrupted by Kai's distress call from the mall. After saving Kai, they regroup with Dawes, and Nick tries again to arrest Stoddard. In a shocking turn of events, once presented with the evidence incriminating Stoddard, Dawes destroys it. Stoddard taunts Nick and Kai sides with them, aiming her gun at Nick. Dawes frames Nick for corruption by planting evidence and declares that good guys don't exist. Betrayed and furious, Nick is handcuffed by Stoddard, realizing he has been set up by those he thought were allies. I guess if I had been paying more attention, I might have seen this coming, but it was pretty surprising. I did not expect Dawes to be in on it. He came across as a pretty clean cop. There were hints about Kai, and I guess in hindsight it makes sense, but this really caught me off guard. 3 years after being framed, Nick Mendoza finds himself on a prison transfer bus, a continuation of the opening cutscene. To his surprise, Tap is seated in front of him and hints that Tyson is orchestrating something big. Moments later, Tyson drives up alongside the bus, throwing an explosive charge that blows the vehicle off the road. Injured but alive, Tap frees Nick from his cuffs and instructs him to meet Tyson at a nearby water tower. He also implies that he had keys up his ass. Alright. This is one of the only levels in the game that breaks from the standard gameplay loop, as you can no longer arrest the enemies. I decided to play as passively as possible, keeping in mind that Nick wouldn't kill innocent police officers. I did my best to avoid any confrontations and evaded law enforcement by sabotaging a hidden meth lab, using the explosion as cover to reach the tower. There, Nick confronts Tyson, questioning the breakout and Tap's involvement. Tyson deflects, claiming Nick should feel flattered and revealing Tap needed to stay in prison to kick his cocaine habit. Tyson then directs Nick to signal a nearby contact who turns out to be Kai. Nick's anger flares at seeing her, but she insists they need his help to take down Dawes. Tyson explains that Dawes' corrupt hotshot operation put him out of business, and Dawes and Stoddard eventually betrayed Kai as well. With no other option as police close in, Nick reluctantly agrees to help, driven by a desire for justice and revenge. Mendoza, now a wanted man, is focused on getting revenge against Captain Dawes and Stoddard. Dawes, now retired from the police force, runs a private law enforcement firm called Preferred Outcomes, seeking investment to expand his reach. Kai reveals that Dawes has ties to the Korean mafia, specifically through a car dealership run by Henry Kang in Koreatown. She directs Nick and Tyson to meet an insider contact, Marcus Boone, or Boomer, for more intel. At the dealership, Boomer is a no-show, forcing the two to break in, download the information from a computer, triggering a silent alarm. I tried my best to arrest as many of these guys as I could. I'm not sure if I missed this or not, but Nick isn't a police officer anymore. The system goes back to being exactly as it was prior to being framed, so I'm not really sure what's happening here. The second wave of enemies is immediately hostile, so I don't even have a chance to take a non-lethal approach. After a chaotic escape, Kai directs them to Kang's scrapyard, where Nick defeats more henchmen and rescues Boomer from a car trunk set to be crushed. Boomer reveals critical data about Dawes and Kang's operation, involving stolen cars smuggled with hotshot drugs. They head to Kang's chop shop, determined to shut down his operation and cripple Dawes' influence in Los Angeles. In a fierce battle, the trio eliminates Kang and his mafia allies, uncovering evidence that Kang's wife planned to kill him and seize control. I didn't really understand this part. I'm not sure why Nick goes straight to kill Kang. I feel like he probably would have tried to take him down or arrest him or something. But no, they just go straight for the kill. Tyson attempts to steal millions worth of cocaine, but abandons it when the forklift carrying the stash gets stuck on train tracks and is destroyed by an oncoming train. There's a gag here where the trio return covered in cocaine to Kai's amusement. Nick utters the infamous,
Not a word.
Boomer uncovers an invitation to a high-profile party at Neil Rourke's mansion in Los Angeles, a neighborhood ridiculously named Mount Olympus. Boomer has to assure Nick that this isn't a joke and that's actually what the neighborhood is called. Nick and Kai decide to infiltrate the gathering and gather intel. Using a power surge device from Boomer, Kai disables the mansion's alarms, allowing them to sneak inside and plant a bug in the meeting room. However, the guests arrive early, forcing them to hide as Stoddard and Rourke pitch an enticing deal. Criminals can buy protection from preferred outcomes, gaining access to corrupt cops and private military forces. After the meeting, Nick suggests planting Kai's phone in a briefcase of cash to track its destination. Kai, focused on solely capturing Stoddard, refuses and leaves after an emotional exchange where Nick reveals the loss of his mother during his imprisonment. Nick successfully plants the phone, but is ambushed by Rourke via video warning. Kai unexpectedly returns, knocking out Rourke and assisting Nick in surviving the assault. Despite Nick's questions, Kai avoids sharing details about what turned her against Dawes and Stoddard, only emphasizing that she doesn't want Dawes dead, she wants him utterly ruined. They escape, being one step closer to taking down Dawes' empire. Nick and Boomer track the phone planted in the briefcase of cash to Dawes' corporate headquarters in Miami. Boomer identifies a secure safe likely containing Dawes' illicit money, but notes it's too strong to blow open. Their only option is using the Brute, a safe-cracking robot owned by a group Boomer once lived with in the Mojave Desert. Fortunately, Boomer secures permission to borrow it. Arriving in the desert, Nick and Boomer meet Boomer's ex-girlfriend, Dune Alpert, and head to the group's compound, a former missile silo. However, Tony Alpert, a white supremacist leader, double-crosses them after being offered $250,000 by Stoddard for Nick. Nick and Boomer get locked up in a bunker, but it's revealed that Dune slipped Boomer a key to escape. I made my way out of the compound, and I experienced my breaking point when it came to arresting everyone. The game soft-locked me by creating a checkpoint as soon as the guards were alerted, so I had no choice but to shoot back. I would have restarted the mission, but by this point in the level, I'd gotten so far that I just said fuck it. Pretty sure these guys were white supremacists anyway, so it's not like anything of value was lost. Dune joins them as they escape in a car, briefly holding them at gunpoint in a playful ruse before Alpert's henchmen ambush them, destroying the vehicle and injuring Dune. I definitely think that Visceral could have taken more risks with this scene. I would have rewritten it so that Dune was killed in the car, maybe struck by a stray bullet or something. I feel like the tonal shift would be a lot more severe, and it would give Tony more of a reason to try and kill Nick. It's not like there's much use for her character at this point anyway. Driving a buggy to the airfield, Nick shares a personal story about his abusive father, Hector, who worked for the Cuban secret police. Growing up with a father who operated on the morally ambiguous side of law enforcement likely contributed to Nick's internal conflict as a cop, trying to uphold justice while navigating a corrupt system. The story subtly implies that Hector's presence looms over Nick's decisions, making his descent into morally gray territory even more depressing, as he wrestles with becoming the very thing he despised growing up. At the airfield, Boomer repairs a plane while Nick retrieves the Brute. They're ambushed by Alpert's gang, forcing Nick to commandeer a broken-down AC-130 cannon, and later, a tank to fend off helicopters and buggies. The battle culminates in a tank duel with Alpert, which Nick obviously wins. This is the most battlefield element in pretty much the entire game. I was actually surprised when I realized I was going to get to drive a tank. The duo escape by plane, destroying Alpert's hotshot manufacturing operation. They return to Tyson and Kai with the Brute, now fully prepared for their final mission. The group is preparing for their heist when, before they can leave their hideout, Stoddard ambushes them, holding Tyson at gunpoint. Nick kills the henchman but suffers a weapon jam, nearly getting killed before Kai bashes Stoddard in the head with is that a wooden plank? Boomer tosses Nick a gun and he shoots Stoddard dead, sending Dawes a photo of Stoddard's body, and the group heads to the headquarters under the cover of 4th of July celebrations. Now this is where I start to have some issues with this mission. Breaking into the skyrise is fun, normal gameplay loop, but the plan is to blow up the water tank on top of the building to flood an elevator shaft so they can swim to the top floor. I'm not too well versed in engineering, but I'm very confident that this would not actually work. There's no way. I know that I'm complaining about something in a game that has already gone out of its way to prove that it's not very grounded in reality, but holy shit is this asking a lot. The building is fucking massive. There's no way. The water would go to the bottom. There is not enough water in that tank to fill the elevator shaft. But they do make it upstairs and they locate the hidden safe and they set up the brute to crack it. Security forces storm the building, leading to a chaotic battle in the dark. I once again tried to arrest these people, but this game does not make it easy. Once the vault is open, they realize that the money is gone and Dawes had rigged it with explosives. And inside the vault, Nick finds Kai's phone ringing, with Dawes taunting him and revealing that he's waiting on some island. The group attempts to escape by zipline, but security guards cut the line, sending Nick and Kai flying all over the city and wrapping around a helicopter, and what in the fuck is happening to this game? After surviving the whatever the fuck that was, and defeating more guards, they escape with Boomer on a boat. A few hours later, Nick and the gang arrive at the island. It wouldn't be a Far Cry game without an island. Kai wants to accompany Nick in confronting Dawes, but Nick insists that she take Tyson to a black market doctor for treatment. After bidding farewell to his crew, Nick ventures alone through the island, arresting every single guard he can find. Or should I say, I arrested every single guard I could find. This mission was tough. This is oddly a puzzle game, somehow. They've somehow incorporated some puzzle mechanics into this fucking game, because that's what it felt like, trying to memorize these patterns and sprint to guards to get them taken down without anyone else seeing. I have such a love-hate relationship with this game, actually. Eventually, Nick reaches Dawes' mansion and finds him calmly writing a letter in his office. Holding Dawes at gunpoint, Nick listens as Dawes offers him a partnership and preferred outcomes, claiming Nick's ability to expose the company's flaws makes him the perfect candidate to fix them. I don't think Nick really exposed any flaws in the company. He kind of just knew who was in charge and tried to kill him. I mean, I feel like I'm missing a lot of context here. Dawes argues that Nick's ruthlessness has made him more criminal than cop. Obviously, this guy hasn't been watching my playthrough. And then Nick just unloads in the fucking guy. He's dead. Nick reads Dawes' letter, which reveals that Dawes framed him for being too moral and idealistic, but ultimately saw Nick as a potential successor. Dawes warns that his private security empire is too entrenched in politics, law enforcement, and crime to be dismantled. He offers Nick his vast fortune hidden in a secret vault, challenging him to decide what to do with it. As Nick stands amongst piles of gold, money, jewelry, Dawes' final question echoes in the vault. What will you do with this fortune? The game concludes with an ambiguous ending, regardless of the choices you make throughout the story, which feels like a missed opportunity. Visceral had the perfect chance to include multiple outcomes based on player decisions, whether you leaned towards arresting enemies or resorted to lethal force, or even based on your final expert level. Instead, the expert system feels like a superficial mechanic, existing mainly to unlock weapons that are counterintuitive for players aiming to stay non-lethal. The disconnect highlights one of the campaign's biggest flaws, a lack of meaningful consequences for how you choose to play. In a story that attempts to explore the complexities of morality as a police officer, you'd expect those choices to carry more weight, but here, they ultimately fall flat. I would have gotten the same ending if I arrested every person in the game, or if I shot every person in the game. Despite my issues with the story, I genuinely enjoyed the gameplay in Battlefield Hardline. Its emphasis on non-lethal takedowns over chaotic shootouts gives it a unique identity and offers a refreshing twist on the traditional FPS formula. The level design stood out as well, offering well-crafted sandboxes that encouraged experimentation. I would have liked to see additional gadgets to assist with making arrests. There seemed to be an attempt to borrow from titles like SWAT 4, albeit very loosely, and I would have liked to see just a little bit more of that. Overall, I think Battlefield Hardline is a solid title that could use some polish. Maybe take Battlefield out of the name, put more focus on strategy, and you'll have a pretty interesting sequel. Unfortunately, that title will not be made by Visceral Games, because shortly after the release of Battlefield Hardline, EA hit them with their infamous hammer of, we're shutting down a good studio because we suck at management. And goddammit, they'll be missed.